The headlines hit like a physical blow, reverberating through newsrooms and living rooms alike. "Canada halts all gas exports to US," screamed across every screen. The words impossible to ignore, their implications sinking in with every passing second. "North American energy pact collapses," declared the New York Times. Its front page a stark record of a partnership suddenly shattered. On a cold December morning, the news sent a shiver down the spine of a continent. The chill outside, now matched by a deeper, more unsettling cold within. In Boston, thermostats suddenly seemed inadequate, as families wondered if their homes would stay warm through the winter. In Houston, energy executives watched market tickers plunge, their faces etched with disbelief as years of stability unraveled in minutes. No one saw it coming. The energy relationship with Canada was as reliable as sunrise, until it vanished in a single announcement from Ottawa, leaving workers and leaders alike stunned. Confusion and disbelief reigned. Was this a mistake? A hack? News anchors scrambled for answers, phones ringing off the hook as experts and officials were pressed for comment. Natural gas futures doubled within the first hour, sending shockwaves through financial markets and households alike. The markets, built on certainty, plunged into chaos. Traders shouted into phones, desperate to make sense of the new reality. This was no minor disruption. It was a severing of the energy artery that kept much of the US warm and powered, threatening to upend daily life for millions. The news felt personal, an act of betrayal from a neighbor long considered family. Trust, built over generations, was suddenly in question. In New Hampshire, a family huddled around the kitchen table, the news warning of price hikes and blackouts. Their sense of security was suddenly fragile, replaced by anxiety and uncertainty. Across Canada, the mood was tense for different reasons. People wondered what would come next and whether the government's gamble would pay off. In Calgary, thousands of jobs were at risk. Workers stared at empty desks, uncertain if they would ever return. In Ottawa, officials defended the decision as necessary for national security and climate goals, insisting it was the only way forward in a changing world. Prime Minister Trudeau addressed the nation, calling it a difficult but essential step for Canada's future. His words were measured, but the gravity of the moment was unmistakable. The message was clear. Canada was putting its own interests first, even if it meant upending a century of friendship and cooperation with its closest ally. The great North American energy alliance was over. The pipelines that once symbolized unity now stood silent and empty. The world watched, wondering how the American giant would react. Allies and rivals alike braced for the fallout. The future felt uncertain and cold, as if the warmth of old alliances had been extinguished overnight. The shock was only beginning. Across North America, millions waited, breath held, for what would come next. For over a century, energy flowed freely between the US and Canada, a symbol of deep trust and shared prosperity. Pipelines crisscrossed the border, fueling American homes and industries, while Canada relied on the US as its biggest customer. This partnership powered economies, funded social programs, and created jobs on both sides. Canada's reliability during global crises made it the cornerstone of US energy security. The idea of Canada weaponizing its resources was unthinkable. Leaders celebrated the relationship as a model of international cooperation, weathering political storms and trade disputes. The infrastructure, investments, and lives were built around this unbreakable bond. Energy flowed regardless of politics, until that December day. The unbreakable broke. The shockwaves would be felt for generations. Trust, once absolute, was shattered in an instant. The era of seamless partnership was over. The aftermath was chaos. Newsrooms buzzed with urgent updates, and city streets pulsed with confusion and fear as the nation tried to make sense of the unfolding disaster. Natural gas prices tripled overnight, slamming the US economy with a force not seen in decades. The sudden spike sent shockwaves through every sector, from manufacturing to transportation. The stock market plunged as investors fled energy-dependent industries. Panic selling wiped out billions in value within hours, leaving retirement accounts and savings in jeopardy. Washington was blindsided. Emergency meetings filled the Situation Room, but calls to Ottawa went nowhere. Leaders scrambled for answers, but diplomatic silence only deepened the uncertainty. On Capitol Hill, blame flew in every direction, paralyzing the government. Lawmakers argued bitterly, unable to agree on a path forward as the crisis escalated. For ordinary Americans, the crisis was immediate. Utility bills soared and states began emergency conservation. Families watched their budgets evaporate as energy costs consumed paychecks. Governors pleaded with citizens to lower thermostats and brace for blackouts. Public service announcements urged everyone to do their part, but anxiety only grew. The term energy poverty became common, describing the new reality for millions who could no longer afford to keep their homes warm. Families faced impossible choices: heat or eat. Parents rationed food, children shivered under blankets, and refrigerators sat empty as grocery budgets shrank. Food banks saw surges, not just for food, but for blankets and warm clothes. Volunteers struggled to keep up as demand soared to unprecedented levels. Small businesses cut hours or closed, unable to absorb the costs. Main streets grew quiet, and local economies teetered on the brink of collapse. The American dream of a warm, secure home was suddenly at risk. Families huddled together, hoping for relief that never seemed to come. The nation's sense of security evaporated, replaced by fear and anger toward Canada. Protests erupted and trust between neighbors was shattered. The crisis deepened with each passing colder day. Winter storms only made things worse, straining already fragile power grids and leaving more people in the dark. The social fabric began to fray. Communities that once stood together now argued over scarce resources, and the sense of vulnerability was unprecedented. America's trust in its northern neighbor was gone. The alliance that once seemed unbreakable now felt irreparably damaged, leaving both nations facing an uncertain future. Canada's decision was years in the making, driven by three forces: domestic energy security, climate ambition, and economic nationalism. Eastern provinces faced shortages, so Ottawa prioritized Canadian needs over exports. Climate goals demanded a drastic cut in fossil fuel exports, aligning policy with environmental values. Economic nationalism surged. Many Canadians felt exploited as a resource colony for the U.S. The Canada First energy strategy redirected gas to Canadians, asserting sovereignty and independence. Ottawa knew the fallout would be severe, but believed the long-term benefits outweighed the cost. The move shattered a century-old friendship, but Canada was determined to chart its own course. Washington scrambled. The nation's capital was gripped by a sense of urgency and uncertainty, as leaders worked around the clock to respond to the unfolding disaster. The president declared a national energy emergency, granting sweeping powers to manage the crisis. This unprecedented move put the entire federal government on high alert, mobilizing agencies and resources in a way not seen in decades. Engineers raced to reroute domestic gas, working late into the night, but the aging pipeline system wasn't built for such rapid changes. Technical limitations and years of underinvestment made their task even more daunting. Diplomats rushed to secure new LNG contracts from abroad, negotiating with allies and rivals alike. Yet, ports and infrastructure lagged behind, unable to handle the sudden surge in demand for imported energy. The Defense Production Act was invoked, maximizing domestic production and overriding environmental rules, sparking fierce debate. Environmentalists warned of long-term consequences, while industry leaders called for even more drastic measures. Industries reliant on cheap gas faced existential threats. Emergency summits and bailouts followed. Many businesses teetered on the brink, with jobs and livelihoods hanging in the balance. The government launched a massive conservation campaign, turned down for Uncle Sam. Citizens were urged to cut back on energy use, adjust thermostats, and embrace new habits to help the nation cope. Billions were rushed to help families pay heating bills, but the scale of the crisis dwarfed relief efforts. Many households still struggled to keep the lights and heat on as winter deepened. The fragility of modern life was exposed. Everyday conveniences vanished overnight, and millions experienced the discomfort and anxiety of rolling blackouts and shortages. America's over-reliance on a single energy source had become a national vulnerability, a weakness that could no longer be ignored by policymakers or the public. The crisis forced a painful reckoning. Lawmakers, business leaders, and ordinary Americans alike were left to confront hard questions about the nation's energy future. The scramble for power was just beginning. As dawn broke, the nation braced for what would come next, knowing the road to recovery would be long and uncertain. The shockwave went global. Europe, already cutting Russian gas, now faced shortages as US LNG exports dried up. A bidding war erupted for gas, prices soared worldwide, developing nations were priced out, triggering blackouts and unrest from Asia to South America. The crisis exposed the world's energy interdependence. One decision in Ottawa darkened villages half a world away. US allies felt betrayed as America prioritized its own needs. Energy producers like Qatar and Russia gained new leverage, demanding concessions for gas. Supply chains buckled, food and goods prices soared, and global inflation surged. The energy crisis became a crisis of the international order. The economic fallout was brutal for both nations. In the US, inflation soared as energy costs rippled through every sector. Manufacturing, food, and jobs all suffered. The Federal Reserve faced impossible choices. Unemployment climbed as factories shut down. In Canada, the loss of its biggest customer devastated the energy sector. Alberta's industry collapsed. Tens of thousands lost jobs, and cities like Calgary plunged into depression. The domestic market couldn't absorb the surplus. The Canadian dollar and economy tanked. Social programs were slashed as government revenues dried up. The move meant to secure sovereignty left Canada poorer and less stable. The lesson: dismantling deep economic ties can devastate both sides. The political rupture was profound. In Washington, Canada was now seen as an unreliable, even hostile neighbor. Calls for tariffs, sanctions, and a rethinking of all bilateral agreements grew louder. The world's longest undefended border suddenly felt tense. Cooperation in defense and intelligence was replaced by suspicion. The North American bloc fractured, weakening both nations on the world stage. China and Russia exploited the rift, courting Canada and isolating the US. Nationalism surged, and anti-Canadian sentiment became a political weapon. The era of friendly cooperation was over, replaced by cold, strategic competition. Out of crisis, a new reality emerged. Energy independence became America's top priority. The debate shifted from if to how fast to transition to renewables. Massive investments poured into solar, wind, batteries, and nuclear. Permitting was streamlined, innovation accelerated. Industry and citizens alike embraced renewables, seeking control over their own power. Ironically, Canada's move forced the US to build a more resilient, sustainable energy system, faster than any climate deal ever could. The painful winter of 2025 became the birth of a new energy era, forged in crisis but powered by hope.